An important hearing involving President Trump's New York hush money case could ultimately lead to his conviction being tossed. Here to break down all of that and much more, which you can find in his weekly newsletter, The Gavel, is the Hill's courts and legal reporter Zach Schoenfeld. Hey, Zach. So let's start with the basic question. What is happening in this hearing, and why could it result in the president's conviction being dropped?
Hey, Drew, this attempt to move courts is part of a two-step dance that Trump's lawyers are trying to pull off here. If they are successful at this hearing and that this federal judge agrees that this case can be moved out of the New York state system and put into federal court, you can expect that the very next move that Trump's lawyers are going to make is to then ask that federal judge to dismiss this case in its entirety. But this is really now the first phase of that battle of whether this case is allowed to be moved out of New York State court. This is an effort that we've seen the president try in this case for years. In fact, even before we saw him go to trial and convicted, he had tried to move courts. It has been rejected by this judge several times.
Hey, welcome everyone. Dr. John is here. So what just happened right now, Judge Alvin Hellerstein has rejected Trump's third attempt to overturn his hush money conviction, ruling his legal team waited too long and chose the wrong strategy. With 34 felony convictions now standing, Trump, a convicted felon in the White House, faces a legal collapse that has sparked panic online, including unconfirmed rumors of his fleeing the country. Let me take you through what actually happened here, because this is crucial for understanding what's coming next and what this means for the presidency going forward. Trump's team has been trying to move his hush money conviction from state court to federal court so they can get it dismissed on immunity grounds and escape the consequences of the conviction. The Supreme Court ruled back in July 2024 that presidents have immunity for official acts.
But Drew, the reason we're watching today's hearing so closely is because Trump has something new in his pocket this time that he didn't have in the previous hearings. And that is, he has a really favorable appeals court rule. An appeals court, the Second Circuit, back in November, said that the judge, when he previously rejected Trump's arguments to move courts, that the judge bypassed important issues and needed to take another look. So now Judge Alvin Hellerstein in New York City is taking that other look today. No word yet on whether he indeed will flip positions and side with Trump, but still a lot of optimism on the Trump team's side today that they will be able to finally convince this judge now that they have that word from the appeals court.
If the president is successful in moving it from the state to the federal court and he asks for it to be dropped, is there thinking that that would be approved? I mean, is that like a tactic that people think would be likely to bear fruit?
Drew, I think is this battle over whether he's allowed to move courts. It is, you would then have an extra step of proving once he's in federal court that the case should be dismissed.
That was a huge ruling that Trump's lawyers seized on immediately. They've been arguing that the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels was somehow an official act related to his presidency, which is ridiculous and frankly insulting to people's intelligence. But that's what they've been arguing in court. So they've been trying to get the conviction moved to federal court so they can use that immunity ruling to get the charges dismissed and make the whole thing go away. But the judge said no. The judge said Trump's team waited 58 days past the 30-day window that was given to them after the Supreme Court immunity ruling came down. They had 30 days from the Supreme Court ruling to make their move.
That being said, though, it'll be similar issues. You know, essentially what he has to show to move courts, for example, is he has to show right now that he has a plausible federal defense. So if he gets to move courts, eventually he has to show that it's not only plausible, but that he actually, his federal defense is correct. So it's a little bit of a lesson standard to actually take that first step of moving courts. But still, if this ruling comes out and Judge Hellerstein says, President Trump, I am allowing you to move your hush money case into federal court, that would be a very, very good sign for the president that the judge may be on his way to dismissing his charges. And just to give you a sense, Drew, of what the basis for what this would be, the president's arguments here are all about, or for the most part, are about presidential immunity. He argues that the jury in New York during that 7-week trial back in 2024, that they saw pieces of evidence that are protected by that Supreme Court landmark ruling on criminal immunity for former presidents. So that is his argument to the judge, saying that the verdict verdict is tainted. It needs to be tossed out. And of course, also making the argument that if he has to advance that argument in New York State court, that the New York judges aren't going to give him a fair shake. And so that's why he says he needs to be in federal court.
And they waited 58 days. That's almost 2 months past the deadline. The judge was not happy about that at all. The judge basically said, you made a choice to wait too long, and now you're stuck with the state conviction and all the felonies that come with it. This is Trump's third attempt to get out of this conviction, and we need to be clear about how significant that is because it shows how desperate his legal team has become. The first attempt didn't work, the second attempt didn't work, and now the third attempt has crashed and burned just like all the others. Trump's legal team has essentially tried every angle and every loophole they can think of, and nothing has worked because the judge isn't having any of it.
Many of our viewers may be watching this and wondering why would the conviction being dropped even actually matter. The president has already avoided serious punishment and obviously didn't hurt much his re-election campaign.
In fact, some members of the president's team would even probably tell you that it helped him if you looked at some of his polling numbers after some of his cases. But Drew, I think that's a really good point, right? Compared to some of your average run-of-the-mill defendants, when you talk about appeals and some of these efforts, that normally is what we're talking about. They're trying to remove their sentence or get out of jail or something like that. That is not the case here with the president. He was sentenced to that unconditional discharge, which essentially means that he doesn't face any jail time or punishment. But that being said, this criminal conviction is still on his record. He is technically right now a convicted felon. And so this battle over moving courts and trying to get these charges dismissed, almost more than anything is almost symbolic, right? Because as you mentioned, Drew, he is back in the White House. Voters didn't seem to mind about these charges and that conviction.
The judge is looking at the facts of the case and saying this is a straightforward hush money payment that has nothing to do with official presidential acts or anything related to Trump's duties as president. That's not something that's protected by immunity. That's not something we can dismiss on immunity grounds. That's a crime. That's fraud related to the payment and the falsification of business records. And the conviction stands because it's valid and supported by evidence presented at trial. And here's what's really important about understanding what's happening right now in this moment. Trump is sitting in the White House as a convicted felon. That's an absolutely unprecedented situation in American history.
So really the main thing that is left is for Trump to, if he can win, to just be able to say that he was able to defeat this case brought by District Attorney Alvin Bragg, just like the president has able to do for the cases that have come out by Special Counsel Jack Smith, as well as Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis down in Georgia. All those cases, of course, Trump has now taken a victory lap and championed the fact that those cases are dismissed. But it's been this hush money case in New York that's still been the nagging one that he hasn't been able to get tossed. One other quick note I just make, Drew, is there would be some other things that would change for Trump. For example, even though he's not facing jail time because he does have that criminal conviction, there are issues surrounding, felons' gun rights, voting rights, certain things like that, where the president still would have some restrictions simply because of that criminal conviction. So it would matter a little bit, even if there is no jail time in the picture here.
Okay, moving over to the Epstein files. The Justice Department found itself in hot water with victims after the latest release. What happened and what does this mean moving forward?
We've never had a convicted felon serving as president. We've never had this situation before in our country's entire history. And now we've got it. And it's creating chaos that's spreading through the entire political system like wildfire. Democrats are already calling for impeachment. Democrats are saying, how can we possibly have a convicted felon in the White House running the country? Republicans are scrambling, trying to figure out how to respond to this crisis. Some are defending Trump. Some are saying, we need to respect the courts and their decisions. Some are distancing themselves quietly, hoping nobody notices. And meanwhile, Trump is at Mar-a-Lago probably freaking out because his legal strategies have all failed, and he's running out of options to save his presidency. The viral claims that he's fled the country are spreading on social media faster than anything. People are making all kinds of jokes about it. People are saying, look, he's at Mar-a-Lago, which is down in Florida, and that's practically a foreign country at this point. People are making jokes, but there's also genuine panic underneath those jokes because people understand what's happening and what it means for the country. Trump's presidency is crumbling in real time. His legal defenses have collapsed completely. He's got a felony conviction that stands and isn't going away. He's got serious health issues that are documented and worsening. He's got the Epstein grand jury footage that just came out showing his connections. He's got the divorce from Melania that just happened. He's got the tax investigation that's ongoing. He's got everything hitting at once from every single direction. And now this federal judge has slammed the door on his last legal hope for escaping the hush money conviction. So Trump is at Mar-a-Lago probably talking to his lawyers, trying to figure out what to do next because the options are running out and the American people are watching this unfold in real time, wondering how much worse it can possibly get before something breaks completely. Let's dig into the legal details here because they're actually really important for understanding exactly what Judge Hellerstein was saying and why he shut this down so hard and with such finality. According to the ruling that came down, Judge Alvin Hellerstein looked at Trump's motion to dismiss and basically said, "You had your chance and you blew it, and now you don't get another one." The Supreme Court ruled in July 2024 that presidents have immunity for official acts. That's a significant ruling that Trump's team seized on immediately. That ruling came down in July, and Trump's team had 30 days from that ruling to file a motion to move the case to federal court and pursue the immunity defense. 30 days. That's the window. That's the time limit that was established. But Trump's team waited 58 days. They waited almost 2 months past the deadline that was set. And when they finally filed the motion after all that time, the judge looked at it and said no. The judge said, "You had 30 days and you waited 58 days. That was a choice you made, and now you're stuck with the consequences of that choice, and there's nothing we can do about it." Now, Trump's lawyers are going to argue that there were reasons for the delay and legitimate explanations for why they couldn't meet the deadline. There were procedural issues that came up. There were things happening in other cases that demanded attention. There were circumstances that they claimed justified the wait and the missed deadline. But the judge wasn't interested in those excuses, and he made that very clear in his ruling. The judge said the deadline was clear and explicit. The deadline was established. You had 30 days from the Supreme Court ruling. You didn't make the filing within 30 days, and therefore you don't get to use this opportunity to move the case to federal court and pursue the immunity defense that you wanted. The judge was basically saying the rules matter in the legal system. Deadlines matter, procedures matter, and Trump's legal team should have figured out how to meet the deadline if they wanted to pursue this strategy, but they didn't. They waited too long, they made a tactical mistake, and now they're paying the price for that miscalculation, and there's no way to undo it. The specific language from Judge Hellerstein in the ruling is important here because it shows exactly how frustrated the judge is with Trump's legal team and their handling of this case. The judge said that Trump's strategy was a choice. The judge emphasized that they chose to wait 58 days past the 30-day window. The judge was emphasizing that this was not some unavoidable circumstance that forced their hand. This was not some emergency that forced the delay and made the deadline impossible to meet. This was a choice that Trump's legal team made. And because of that choice, Trump is stuck with his state conviction and all the felonies that come with it. The judge was basically calling out Trump's lawyers for being either incompetent or for gaming the system intentionally. Either way, the judge was clearly not happy about the situation, and the judge made his displeasure absolutely clear in the ruling that he issued. The hush money conviction itself is really straightforward when you look at the facts of the case. 34 felonies related to the payment to Stormy Daniels back in 2016. Trump's team has been arguing that this payment was somehow a necessary official act in his capacity as president and therefore protected by immunity, which is absurd because it happened before he was president. Trump made this payment to Stormy Daniels in 2016 when he was a private citizen running for office. It had nothing to do with official presidential duties. It had nothing to do with anything related to being president or anything he did in his role as president. It was a hush money payment to an adult film actress to keep her quiet during the campaign. And now Trump is trying to argue that it's protected by presidential immunity, which makes no sense whatsoever. The judge looked at that argument and said, no, that's not an official act. That's not something protected by immunity. That's a campaign finance violation. That's a fraud scheme related to falsifying business records. That's a crime and you're convicted of it, and the conviction stands because the evidence supports the guilty verdict. Now here's the thing that's really important about understanding the political impact of this ruling, because it's massive. Trump is currently serving as president. He's the sitting president of the United States right now, and he's a convicted felon with 34 felony convictions on his record. The judge has now made absolutely clear that his conviction is going to stand. It's not going away. It's not getting reversed or overturned. It's not getting dismissed by some legal trick or loophole. Trump is convicted of 34 felonies related to falsifying business records in connection with the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels. That conviction stands as final now, and that's unprecedented in American history. We've never had this situation before. A sitting president convicted of felonies while in office. It's a constitutional crisis. It's an unprecedented moment, and it's creating chaos throughout the entire political system, from the Congress to the courts to the intelligence agencies. The Second Circuit already had the case, and they remanded it back to the lower court for an immunity evidence review to see if there was anything new that might change the outcome. But Judge Hellerstein looked at what came out of that review and said it doesn't matter. The evidence that they reviewed doesn't change anything about the case. The conviction still stands. The immunity defense still doesn't apply, and therefore Trump's motion to move the case to federal court gets denied completely. And finally, the judge was essentially saying, we've looked at this from every angle and from every possible direction. We've reviewed the immunity question thoroughly. We've considered all the arguments that Trump's lawyers have presented, and the answer is no. The conviction stands. There's nothing in the immunity ruling from the Supreme Court that protects Trump from a hush money conviction from 2016 when he was a private citizen. So Trump's legal strategy has failed completely, and there's no appeal from this decision that's going to work. This is Trump's third attempt to get out of this conviction, and we need to really emphasize that because it shows how many times he's tried and failed. Let me be very clear about this. Trump has tried 3 different legal strategies to escape the consequences of this conviction over the past several months. The first attempt failed completely. The second attempt failed completely. And now the third attempt has crashed and burned just like all the others before it. Trump's legal team has essentially run out of different angles and different loopholes that they can try and pursue. They've exhausted the legal strategies that were available to them. Nothing has worked because the judge isn't interested in legal games or procedural tricks at this point. Trump's legal team can talk about taking this to the Second Circuit and continuing the appeal process, but that's just delaying the inevitable and burning through more of Trump's legal resources without changing the outcome. Trump is going to remain a convicted felon no matter how many appeals he files or how many judges he tries to convince. So at some point, Trump's legal team is probably going to have to accept that reality and move on to other legal battles that might be more winnable or at least have a better chance of success. The timing of this ruling is also significant and important to understand because it's happening right now when Trump is already dealing with so much chaos and crisis from every direction. The Epstein grand jury footage just came out showing his past connections to Epstein. The files with 38,000 mentions of Trump just dropped and spread all over the internet. Trump's health crisis from the rally collapse is still dominating the news cycle 24/7. Melania just filed for divorce, which is a massive personal blow. The tax investigation is ongoing and getting more serious. The legal problems are piling up from every single direction simultaneously. And now on top of all of that chaos, the judge just made it absolutely clear that Trump's hush money conviction is going to stand, that Trump is going to remain a convicted felon, that his legal team's last attempt to escape the consequences has failed. So Trump is at Mar-a-Lago right now, probably losing his mind because everything is collapsing at the same time. Every legal defense is failing. Every attempt to escape consequences is crashing, and the walls are closing in from every direction, and there's nowhere left to run. Okay, so let's break down what this judge's ruling actually means going forward, because there's a lot to consider here, and you need to understand all the implications and what comes next. First thing is that Trump's conviction is now final, and it's not going away, and it's not getting overturned, and there's no legal mechanism that's going to make it disappear. The judge made that absolutely clear in the ruling that was issued. There is no immunity defense that's going to protect him from this conviction, no matter how hard his lawyers try. There is no legal trick or loophole that's going to make it disappear into thin air. Trump is a convicted felon, and that's the legal reality that he's stuck with for the rest of his life. The conviction stands. 34 felonies, all related to the hush money payment and the falsification of business records associated with that payment. Trump tried 3 different legal strategies to escape it, and all 3 failed completely. So this is now the baseline legal reality of Trump's presidency, and it's something that defines his entire time in office. He's serving as president while being a convicted felon. That's unprecedented, and it's devastating for his political standing and for the Republican Party. Second thing is that this ruling is going to supercharge Democratic messaging heading into the midterms, and it's already starting to happen. Democrats are already talking about impeachment based on this ruling. Democrats are already saying, how can we possibly have a convicted felon in the White House running the country and making decisions about war and peace and the economy? And now they've got a federal judge's ruling that backs up their argument completely and definitively. The judge has made clear that Trump's conviction is valid and it stands and it's not going anywhere. So Democrats can point to that ruling and say, the courts have spoken. The courts have affirmed that Trump is guilty of these crimes and therefore he should not be president, and we need to consider impeachment and removal from office. That's powerful messaging heading into the midterms. That's the kind of message that resonates with voters and makes people think about whether they want to support Trump. That's the kind of message that's going to swing independents and swing voters away from Trump and away from the Republican Party heading into these critical elections. Third thing is that this is part of a legal avalanche that's bearing down on Trump from every single direction simultaneously, and there's no escape. We've got the Epstein files dropping with 38,000 mentions of Trump scattered throughout them. We've got the grand jury footage of Epstein talking about Trump on video under oath to federal investigators. We've got the hush money conviction now finalized and standing with no way to overturn it. We've got the tax investigation that's ongoing and getting more serious. We've got evidence deletion scandals involving his Attorney General Bondi. We've got pardon controversies with allies. We've got all these legal problems piling up at once from every direction. And Trump doesn't have good answers for any of them. Every legal defense is failing. Every attempt to escape consequences is crashing. Every strategy that Trump's legal team has tried has backfired. So Trump is in genuine legal jeopardy from every direction simultaneously. And the American people are watching this unfold and understanding that something is deeply wrong with Trump's administration and his ability to govern effectively. Fourth thing is what this means for Trump's ability to govern and function as president and for the Republican Party heading into the midterms and beyond. A president who's a convicted felon has massive credibility problems that he can't overcome. A president who's dealing with this many legal scandals simultaneously can't focus on governing effectively or advancing any kind of agenda. A president who's isolated at his compound at Mar-a-Lago is not presenting the image of strength and stability that voters want and need from their leader. So Trump is in a terrible position politically, and it's getting worse every single day. The Republican Party is in a terrible position politically, and it's getting worse for them too. They're heading into the midterms with a president who's a convicted felon dealing with multiple scandals simultaneously and isolated at his compound away from Washington. That's not a winning position for Republicans. That's a position that's going to cost Republican seats in the House and the Senate, and it's going to cost them control of Congress. Fifth thing is the constitutional questions that are still hanging over everything and threatening to get even more serious. We've got the health crisis from the rally collapse that Trump had just a few days ago. We've got legitimate questions about the 25th Amendment and whether Trump is fit to serve. We've got medical questions about whether Trump can handle the stress of being president. And now we've got a federal judge saying that Trump is a convicted felon and his conviction stands permanently. These are constitutional questions that people are asking about seriously. These are questions that Congress might have to address at some point in the future. If things get even worse, if Trump's health deteriorates further, if another incident happens, if there's another crisis, then you're talking about genuine constitutional crisis territory that the country has never dealt with before. And Trump's felony conviction is going to make that even worse because it shows a pattern of legal problems and legal liability that goes way beyond just the current health crisis and extends into his character and his judgments. Sixth thing is that this ruling essentially closes off Trump's last legal avenue for escaping the hush money conviction permanently. Trump has now tried 3 different strategies to overturn or get out of this conviction, and all 3 have failed completely. He could continue appealing to higher courts and spending making millions of dollars, but those appeals are going to take time and they're probably not going to succeed because the judge has made his position absolutely clear. The conviction stands. There's no immunity defense. There's no legal trick that makes it go away. Trump is stuck with this conviction. He's going to be remembered as the first sitting president to be a convicted felon in American history. That's his legacy at this point, and that's something that can never be changed or undone, no matter what happens going forward in his presidency or in his life. Now let's talk about what happens with the appeal process going forward and whether Trump's team is going to continue fighting. Trump's team is saying they'll go to the Second Circuit and they're going to continue fighting in the appellate courts. But based on Judge Hellerstein's ruling and the clear language that he used, it doesn't seem like those appeals are going to succeed or accomplish anything. The judge has basically said the legal questions have been resolved definitively. The immunity defense doesn't apply to this situation. The conviction stands and it's not going anywhere. So the appeals are probably just going to delay the inevitable and burn through more of Trump's already depleted legal resources without changing the outcome. Trump is going to remain a convicted felon no matter how many appeals he files or how much money he spends on lawyers. So at some point, Trump's legal team is probably going to have to accept that reality and move on to other legal battles that might be more winnable. I also want to talk about the domino effect that this ruling is going to have on Trump's other legal problems and other legal battles that are ongoing. The hush money conviction now standing is going to make it harder for Trump to defend himself in the tax investigation. It's going to make it harder for him to defend himself on the Epstein questions and the connections to Epstein. It's going to make it harder for him to maintain credibility with the American people when he's making claims about his innocence. Each legal defeat makes the next legal battle harder because it establishes a pattern of guilt and legal liability and criminal behavior. So now that the hush money conviction is finalized and standing permanently, Trump is in an even worse legal position on every other front and in every other case. The walls are closing in from every direction. The legal jeopardy is compounding and Trump doesn't have good answers for any of it anymore. And then there's what's happening with Republican Party unity and cohesion going into the midterms and whether the party can hold together. Some Republicans are standing by Trump and defending him publicly. Some Republicans are distancing themselves quietly, hoping nobody notices their absence. Some Republicans are calling for investigations into Trump's conduct. Some Republicans are saying the courts have spoken and we need to respect the courts and their decisions. So the party is fracturing along multiple lines. The party is not unified heading into these critical elections. And that fracture is going to cost Republican seats in the midterms and in House races and Senate races because you need party unity to win elections. When your party is divided over whether to defend the president who's a convicted felon sitting in the White House, that's a huge problem for your party. That's a massive problem heading into elections, and it's going to reshape the political landscape. The bigger picture here is that Trump's presidency is in complete crisis, an existential crisis right now. The legal system has spoken. The judge has spoken. The conviction stands. Trump is a convicted felon sitting in the White House. That's the reality now. And it's a reality that's going to shape everything about the midterms and everything about the rest of Trump's presidency going forward. Voters are going to be voting on whether they want to support a convicted felon and his party. And based on everything we're seeing and everything that's happening, that's a really tough sale for Republicans to make to voters. This judge's ruling is going to be the centerpiece of Democratic messaging and Democratic advertising. This is going to define the midterms and the election season. There's a really important factor here that I haven't mentioned yet, and it's the question of Trump's mental state and his ability to continue functioning as president under this kind of pressure. When you have a convicted felon serving as president, when you have all these legal problems piling up at once, when you have your personal life falling apart with a divorce, when you have health issues that are documented and serious, the stress is going to be overwhelming. And stress affects judgment. Stress affects decision making. Stress affects the ability to lead effectively. So this isn't just about legal consequences. This is about governance and the ability to lead the country through crises. The comparison to other presidents who have faced scandals is instructive here. Nixon was ground down by Watergate over time. The drip, drip, drip of revelations eventually made it impossible for him to govern. Clinton survived impeachment but was damaged politically, and his agenda stalled. But neither of those situations involved a president who was literally a convicted felon. That's a whole different level of legal liability and political damage. Trump is facing legal consequences that no other president has faced, and the cumulative weight of all of this is going to be crushing. The American people are watching this unfold and they're drawing conclusions. They're seeing a president who can't escape legal consequences. They're seeing a president who's isolated from Washington and from the normal operations of government. They're seeing a president who's dealing with multiple scandals simultaneously. And they're making judgments about whether this is someone they want leading the country. The polling is going to reflect this. The election results are going to reflect this. And the Republican Party is going to pay the price for tying itself to a convicted felon. Let me talk about what happens if Trump actually does try to flee the country or leave the presidency early. The constitutional procedures for that are complicated. The 25th Amendment allows for temporary transfer of power if the president is incapacitated. Impeachment allows for removal if Congress determines that the president has committed high crimes and misdemeanors. But there's no procedure for a president simply leaving the country and abandoning his post. That would be uncharted constitutional territory. That would create a crisis that the country has never dealt with before. And given Trump's current legal situation, given the mounting pressure from all directions, it's not impossible to imagine him deciding that he's had enough and just walking away. The social media speculation about him fleeing might seem exaggerated, but it reflects a genuine concern about what Trump might do when backed into a corner. When you have a president who's a convicted felon, who's facing multiple legal investigations, whose personal life is falling apart, whose health is declining, and who's isolated from normal political support systems, you have to wonder what he might do to escape the consequences. Trump has always been a survivor. He's always found a way to avoid accountability. But his options are running out, and the judge's ruling has closed off one of his last avenues of escape. The midterm elections are going to be a referendum on Trump's presidency and on the Republican Party's willingness to defend a convicted felon. Democrats are going to make this a central issue. They're going to run ads showing Trump's conviction and asking voters whether they want a convicted felon, making decisions about their lives. And that message is going to resonate with independent voters. It's going to resonate with suburban voters. It's going to resonate with voters who are tired of the chaos and the scandals and the constant drama. This judge's ruling is the final nail in the coffin of Trump's legal strategy for the hush money case. There are no more legal avenues to pursue. There are no more loopholes to exploit. There are no more delays that can change the outcome. Trump is a convicted felon, and that's not going to change. And that reality is going to shape everything about his presidency going forward. The walls are closing in, the legal jeopardy is compounding, and Trump is running out of places to hide. The American people need to understand the gravity of this moment. We're living through something that has never happened before in our country's history. A sitting president is a convicted felon. A federal judge has confirmed that conviction. And the political system is trying to figure out how to respond to this unprecedented situation. The coming weeks and months are going to be defining moments for American democracy. The decisions that are made now will shape the future of the presidency and the future of the rule of law in this country. Trump's presidency is in its final stages. The legal system has caught up with him. The judge has spoken, the conviction stands. And nothing Trump does can change that reality. He can hide at Mar-a-Lago. He can make social media posts. He can attack the judges and the legal system. But the facts are the facts. The conviction is the conviction. And Trump is a convicted felon sitting in the White House. That's the legacy he'll leave behind. That's the history he's making. And that's the reality that we all have to live with as we navigate this unprecedented moment in American history. The question now is what happens next? How will Congress respond? How will the courts respond? How will the American people respond? The answers to those questions will determine the future of our democracy.